The story of Cain and Abel. In the early days of our world, when humanity was still young and the memory of Eden was fresh, Adam and Eve welcomed their first child into the world. They named him Cain, and Eve marveled at how she had brought forth new life with the help of the Lord. The baby's first cry echoed with promise in a world that was still learning its own rhythms. As Cain grew, his parents watched him discover the world with wonder. He learned to walk on legs still unsteady, reached out to touch the flowers that bloomed in their new home outside Eden, and showed a particular interest in the way things grew from the earth. Even as a small child, he would spend hours watching seeds sprout and plants reach toward the sun. In time, a second son joined their family. They named him Abel, and from his earliest days, he showed a gentle spirit that drew animals to him. Where Cain was serious and focused on the soil, Abel found joy in caring for the creatures that gathered around him. The two brothers grew together, each developing their own ways of contributing to their family's life. As the boys grew into young men, they naturally fell into different paths of work. Cain became a tiller of the ground, finding satisfaction in coaxing food from the soil that God had cursed after the fall. He learned the patterns of the seasons, the ways of water and wind, and how to make things grow even in difficult conditions. His hands became strong and calloused from working the earth, and he took pride in seeing the fruits of his labor. Abel became a keeper of flocks, developing a deep understanding of the animals in his care. He knew each sheep by its voice, could tell when one was ailing, and showed remarkable patience in tending to their needs. The gentle way he cared for his flock reflected his tender heart, and the animals thrived under his attention. Both brothers worked hard in their chosen paths, each contributing to their family's well-being in their own way. They lived in a world that was both beautiful and challenging, where the memory of Eden served as both a reminder of what was lost and a promise of God's continuing care for his creation. As the seasons turned, the time came for both brothers to bring offerings to the Lord. This was not a duty or burden, but a natural expression of gratitude for the blessings they had received. The air was cool and sweet on the morning they prepared their gifts, the sun casting long shadows across the peaceful landscape. Cain gathered from his harvest, selecting portions of the fruit of the ground. His offering represented months of careful tending, of watching the sky for rain, and protecting tender shoots from harsh winds. He had learned to read the earth's moods, to know when to plant and when to harvest. His offering came from this knowledge, this partnership with the soil. Abel chose from among his firstborn lambs, selecting the finest from his flock. He had watched these lambs grow from their first wobbling steps, had protected them through storms and guided them to the sweetest grass. His offering came from a place of deep connection to the lives in his care. Each animal known and treasured. As they prepared their offerings, the brothers might have remembered the stories their parents told of walking with God in the garden, of that close communion now lost, but not forgotten. Perhaps they hoped their gifts would bridge that distance, would speak of their desire to honor the Creator who had given them life and purpose. They brought their offerings to the appointed place as the sun climbed higher in the sky. Abel placed his lamb upon the altar with gentle reverence, while Cain arranged his harvest with careful attention. Both stepped back to wait. The morning quiet except for the soft sound of wind through grass. The Lord looked upon Abel and his offering with favor. Perhaps it was the way Abel had chosen his gift, giving his very best with a heart full of love and trust. The acceptance was felt in the peaceful stillness of the moment, in the way the smoke rose straight and true toward heaven. But when the Lord looked upon Cain and his offering, something was different. The acceptance that had blessed his brother's gift was absent. It was not about the nature of the gift itself, for God had blessed both the fruits of the field and the animals of the flock. Rather, it was about something deeper, something in the heart that only God could see. Cain felt the difference keenly. His face fell, and anger began to simmer in his heart. The peace of the morning shattered for him as he struggled with feelings of rejection and jealousy. Where once he had seen his brother as a companion in life's journey, he now saw a rival who had somehow surpassed him. The Lord, seeing the storm gathering in Cain's heart, spoke to him with gentle concern. The words came not as judgment, but as invitation. Like a parent helping a child understand their own emotions. Why are you angry? And why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. These words hung in the air like morning mist, offering Cain a choice. They spoke of hope, of the possibility of turning from the dark path his thoughts were taking. They reminded him that he had the strength to master the anger that threatened to consume him. In this moment, suspended between choice and consequence, Cain stood at a crossroads. But anger, once given room to grow, has a way of drowning out wiser voices. The peaceful days that had marked their lives began to change. Where once Cain had found joy in watching things grow, now his thoughts turned inward, feeding on bitter comparisons and perceived slights. The ground he worked seemed to mock him. and his brother's presence became a constant reminder of his wounded pride. One quiet morning, Cain spoke to Abel, suggesting they walk together in the field. His voice was calm, giving no hint of the turmoil within. Abel, who had always looked up to his older brother, agreed readily. Perhaps he hoped this time together would heal whatever had come between them. They walked side by side as they had done countless times before, their shadows stretching before them in the early light. What happened in that field would echo through all of human history. In a moment of unleashed anger, Cain turned against his brother. The sacred bond of family was broken, and for the first time, human blood stained the earth that had once known only the gentle fall of rain and the tender touch of caring hands. The silence that followed was different from any silence the world had known before. It was a silence heavy with loss, with the weight of an action that could never be undone. The wind still moved through the grass. Birds still sang their morning songs. But something fundamental had changed in the fabric of creation. When the Lord spoke again, the question came softly, but carried the weight of divine knowledge. Where is Abel, your brother? Like the question asked of his parents in Eden, this was not a request for information, but an invitation to confession, to acknowledgement, to the possibility of redemption, even in the face of terrible wrong. Cain's response echoed through time, words that revealed how far his heart had wandered from the path of love. I do not know, am I my brother's keeper? But the earth itself testified to what had happened. For Abel's blood cried out from the ground that had received it. That soil which Cain had tended so carefully now bore witness against him. The Lord spoke again, and though the words carried judgment, they were shaped by sorrow rather than anger. The ground that had been Cain's passion and purpose would no longer yield its strength to him. He would become a wanderer, restless upon the earth that could no longer be his home. The connection he had cherished with the soil was broken, just as he had broken the bond with his brother. Cain, finally understanding the magnitude of what he had done, cried out in anguish. His punishment seemed too great to bear. Fear filled his heart as he imagined living as a fugitive, away from the presence of the Lord and the protection of home. In his distress, he saw himself vulnerable to anyone who might find him. But even in this darkest moment, mercy appeared. The Lord placed a mark upon Cain, not as a symbol of shame, but as a sign of protection. Anyone who might seek vengeance would face severe consequences. Even in judgment, God provided a measure of grace, ensuring that the cycle of violence would not continue. So Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. The word Nod means wandering, and in this name we see both Cain's punishment and the restlessness that would mark his descendants. He who had once found his identity in making things grow now lived as one disconnected from the soil that had been his life. In time, Cain built a city, perhaps trying to create stability in his wandering existence. He had a son named Enoch, and life continued. The world grew and changed, filled with the achievements and struggles of those who came after. But the story of these first brothers remained as a reminder of both human frailty and divine mercy. Adam and Eve, who had already known the pain of paradise lost, now faced an even deeper sorrow. One son was gone forever, and another was banished to a life of wandering. Yet even in this tragedy, life persisted. Another son, Seth, was born to them, and through him the line of faith would continue. As we reflect on this ancient story in the quiet of evening, we find that its echoes still resonate in our own hearts. Like ripples in still water, the consequences of that first act of violence continue to spread through human history. Yet within this sobering tale, we also find threads of hope and wisdom that can guide us toward peaceful paths. The story reminds us that we all face moments of disappointment and rejection, times when our offerings seem unappreciated, or when others receive the recognition we desire. In these moments, we stand where Cain stood, at the crossroads between mastering our emotions and being mastered by them. The Lord's gentle warning about sin crouching at the door speaks to our own daily struggles with jealousy, anger, and pride.